Welcome to the Tabletop Gaming Guild. The Tabletop Gaming Guild is all about the experiences and memories that playing games with friends and families can create. On this episode, we will be talking about what makes a great game. As always, we have your hosts, Nathan Wilson and
James Wilson.
And
Dan Regowitz is here again.
And we will be talking about what makes a great game.
Games are awesome, right guys? Just awesome.
So Nathan has a very scientific process. I went through and I thought, why the heck do I like any game I have over there? The only reason I like any of my games is because they're engaging, they're fun, which is super hard to be quantifiable, and they have a theme that I like. Doesn't have to be much of a theme or any theme, it just has to be something that I can get myself wrapped around.
And I try to make it less about myself. Not necessarily whether I liked it or not, but whether I could see it as a good game, whether many people would like it.
I took a kind of an abstract angle on my list. So I tried to come up with a list of ways games are awesome, and then I found examples of games that are awesome that way in my collection.
So you have the analytical approach, I have the emotional approach, and Nathan has the autistic approach.
I would call mine analytic. I did break it down into a bunch of categories.
So I have two analytics, and I'm just emotional. All right, let's go.
I thought we should start by talking about the more superficial elements of what makes a great game, such as the name of the game. It may seem insignificant, but it actually can be important. Like, you want a good, strong name that draws people's attention, be memorable, be searchable, and actually set the expectation for the game. So it's like, you don't want a game called Firefly and have it about going into the ocean.
It's not really about Firefly.
That's true, too. Blood Rage, when you hear that name, you automatically think Amerithrash.
Oh, we're going to wreck each other, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So you're setting your expectation, and if that expectation doesn't match, it could potentially ruin the game for people. A good example of one that didn't quite work for me was Paper Tales, which is a good game. But based on the name, I was kind of going in expecting like storytelling elements, but it's pretty much a straight drafting card game.
Yeah, similar to Seven Wonders, only simpler, right?
Yes.
I could definitely see that point and put into the same box as the title, the cover art, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you guys like the title and the cover art. I'm the worst person in the world for this then because I like Agricola. What the heck is that?
Concordia?
Concordia, with the most bored lady in the face of the planet.
Concordia is on my list for a different reason, but we'll get into that.
I would say with all these elements of what makes a great game, you don't have to like nail each one. If you're strong on most of them, you can kind of make up for being weak on another. Euros don't necessarily have to have that really gripping artwork because people are somewhat expecting a strategic, dare I say, dry game from a Euro.
Only from the uninitiated.
It's just a different style of game. You're not expecting flashy from a Euro necessarily.
That's true. I don't have anything flashy in my Euro.
I think that's going to be a running theme through most of what I talk about is expectations set by the various elements of the game and whether they match the person playing.
I have a really bad feeling that every time you come up with something that makes it a great game, I'm going to have the anti-game that I like that I think is great. So, yeah, I got a lot of title ones that don't make any sense. Although I would say art is extremely important to me if it's not a Euro. Games like area control games where there's like 8,000 of them, I want there to be a lot of art, like Blood Rage, Rising Sun. Part of me liking them is the art and the miniatures and that sculpts.
Yeah.
Yeah, artistic design was on my short list of things that make games awesome. I couldn't find a really good example from my own collection, but it's definitely on my radar.
It doesn't matter how good the mechanics are. If you don't grab the attention of the person with good art or good title or buzz, people aren't going to pick it up and nobody's going to know it's a great game.
Concordia is a good example of that.
Yeah, it took a long time for Concordia to catch on.
Took a long time for me to get over the cover and buy it.
Yeah.
And then I regretted not playing it until then.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Dan? I know you like Concordia.
I do. While we're bashing on it, it did make my list as an awesome game. And I think the thing that puts it over the top for me personally was that effectively it's grokkable. It's got a simple system of well laid out rules. Like a lot of simple systems, it hides a great deal of complexity and depth. A lot of people feel about this with abstracts. My pick is Concordia because I don't like any abstracts that I've tried yet. But ultimately, the core of the gameplay is you pick one of these cards in your hand, you play it, You do what it says. And there's only like 9 or 10 unique cards in Concordia, and most of the actions are pretty straightforward. Yet out of that breeds this entire system that's quite frankly amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing how, like, that game, there really isn't a theme in it, but it's super engaging. There's high level of player interaction because you're invested in what other players do, because you can get bonuses and stuff when they fire off your provinces and you get the resources in. Just for having pretty much bad art, I think it's still a really immersive environment. Like, when I play Concordia, I am, like, invested in the game. All I'm thinking about is playing it, watching the other players do it. You're right, it's a super awesome game, and it pulls all this off despite its horrific art.
Yeah, despite some of the artistic design is bad, like the box art, but the iconography is spot on. For example, the board is understandable, though drabbish in color, but you can't mistake provinces for each other.
It's super easy to tell what everything does. So yeah, the graphic design definitely makes up for a portion of the art.
I did hear an argument recently between graphic design and art. Graphic design, that's talking about more as like how things are laid out and making it as accessible as possible. And the art can't override the graphic design. Otherwise, it's just not a good game.
You have a contradiction behind you. You have Race for the Galaxy. It has horrible art and horrible iconography, but it's a great game.
That is true.
It's been a while since I've played that one. The language of symbols, I'm going to call it a language, certainly takes a couple plays to adjust to.
Definitely not English as a language.
I can't give the artwork on the cards a high mark because I don't remember too many of them. They're sci-fi spaceships and robots and planets and things, and I don't think there's really anything stand outish.
The art reminds me a lot of Eclipse.
For that one, iconography and the art and graphic design, all those elements knocked it down for a lot of people, and a lot of people they lost a fair amount of their audience because of that. Very good game in many respects. The graphic design definitely set that game back.
Yeah, for the record, I believe it is a good game. I just don't think it's a great or amazing one.
So take that, you say.
And we were talking about amazing games. We need to pile on the awesome.
We're not talking about mediocre. It's only amazing.
So, going back to one of the things that you mentioned in the intro, theme can really make a game easier to understand, connects to existing expectations, it can connect you to stuff that's out there in the real world or in literature and in other media. The game in my collection that really hits it out of the park on theme is Dinosaur Island.
Yeah, the Jurassic Park-like game.
Oh, yeah.
So you're building a theme park, and it's a dinosaur theme park, of course, and you collect DNA, and you spend it to make dinos, and when you make new dinos, your threat meter goes up, and then you have to build security, or else they get out and trample or otherwise injure your park goers, and it's a great game, and it feels like you're building an amusement park. Albeit a weird one, but it's got rides and like foodie stands and things that aren't dinosaurs that make it more park-like as well.
Didn't like the food stands all have like dinosaur names?
Yeah. It's like Clever Girl Grill and Dino Nugget.
The production elements was part of the reason I think a lot of people buy it. I heard of people buying it just to get those little dinosaur meeples. Production can take a good game into the range of being a great game. Having a nice production values, like Mechs versus Minions. Phenomenal production value, especially at the cost. I love everything about that game. I love program movement, and I love like the campaign elements, but it's really the thing that sells that game and makes it so great is the fact that you have unique minis, you have multiple mini designs that you didn't need to have, and you have your own unique character that's pretty cool looking. And it really kind of helps with the immersion element and really getting you into the game.
Components, I called it, is definitely on my list. James, did you identify a game that was awesome in this way?
Actually, most of my games have really, really good components I like. The Rising Sun, Blood Rage Again, Scythe, Twilight Imperium.
Yeah, somebody brought Scythe to club last week, and they were playing it at a different table. When we were done with Terraforming Mars, I watched it for a little bit. But they were just finishing up, and it was getting pretty late, so we weren't able to sit down for one. But yeah, it's got good bits, I'll give you that. In addition to things that you said, Nathan. High quality components can give a game good table presence. Could be the shape of the board or how things are laid out. This is especially true of like con games, something that's big and that gets set up, attracts people's eyes from across the room. My game with excellent components is Godfather Corleone's Empire. It's got all those unique sculpts on these minis that represent your family members and also your thugs. They didn't need to do that. They could have thrown like meeples in that game, but then like there's also full minis for like the NPCs like the cop and the union boss and the horse head first player marker. And this is great. And it just feels so good to pick up those minis and move them around. And when you perform a hit, knock them over into the Hudson River because that's a big part of that game.
Well, getting back to theme, the game that you like the most has the best theme. Was that Dinosaur Island?
For me, it was Dinosaur Island, yeah.
For me, that's going to be Mansions of Madness.
Oh, that's a relatively new one for you, right?
Yeah, I've played it a lot, and I really never got into H.P. Lovecraft theme at all until that. But the app and then everything inside of it has super art. The miniatures are awesome. It has little pictures of all the monsters, all the full art player cards for all the different investigators you can pick. Theme-wise, it's just unbelievable. I really got to get you to play that game.
Yeah, I definitely need to give this a shot. I've got Arkham Horror, the 3rd edition over here, and I've played that a couple times, and I like that. I don't think it's amazing, but I definitely like it, so.
You'll be like, why did I play any other game other than Mansions of Madness for my entire life as soon as we play it?
Now, that's unlikely to happen, sir.
You'll see, you'll see.
I think under theme, there's more to talk about, because it can be easily assumed that, okay, you have this highly thematic, story-driven game, we're saying that's necessarily better. Abstract is on the opposite side of theme, but doesn't necessarily mean that an abstract is a bad game. Your market is very different with an abstract than it is with an Amerithrash. Or, again, your theme is whether you want strong immersion through heavy storytelling and really intense theme integration, or you want the theme to be light and, keep the focus on the mechanics.
So, just in my theme of giving Nathan a rough time, do you think Agricola has a theme?
Very light.
I mean, it has a setting, right? You're specifically farmers in the 17th century, is it? France, right?
So, for me, Agricola has a very strong theme.
Okay.
So, for me, when I'm playing it, I feel like I am a farmer who is somehow having an incredibly hard time feeding my own family and growing grain and vegetables and trying to raise animals. And for me, it actually does feel like you're struggling. Because the game really is brutal for the feeding part and for setting up your stuff versus getting points. So for me, that brings out a theme. So now that you know that my bar is way down here, very low. Good podcasting, it's really low.
You can't see it, gentlemen, but it's about 2 inches off the floor.
Pretty much where my thematic bar is. For me, that has a lot of theme.
And for the listeners to know, he also had his hand outside the camera range, so we couldn't see it either.
Games can cause a certain level of stress, even frustration. And sometimes that's a good thing. Now, for me, the game that causes me the most stress, yet is a blast, is actually Lords of Vegas.
Ah.
You guys know this one?
Yes.
It's effectively a property management game where you're trying to build casinos on the New Vegas Strip. You rake in a lot of cash over the course of the game, but cash means nothing in this game. You're trying to advance on this victory point track, and the only way to do that is to control casinos and to control large casinos. So oftentimes, on your turn, you're faced with options that can only improve your chances of earning those victory points. So you have to make a choice based on risk and make your bid to go big or just go home. I just love it when this game gives me several dubious options and I have to take one. There's some turns in this game where I'm like, oh man, this is such a bad decision, but there are no other better decisions, so I'm going to make it.
Yeah, and that's an extremely good point. The good type of stress makes some of the games phenomenally awesome for me. But before I tell you mine, what would be one, Nathan, that you think that gives a good amount of stress that is an excellent or awesome game?
Twilight Struggle really hits the right pitch for me, where it's stressful, things can go bad, but when they go bad, there's an equal chance you can have a sudden swing in your favor. It's constant ebb and flow, and you never feels unfair. And I think that's a key point in anything stressful. If it ever feels unfair, it immediately goes into frustration instead of fun.
So your answer of the best game is wrong.
Please enlighten us.
It is Star Wars Rebellion. Star Wars Rebellion is perfect for the amount of stress it induces. I can't even sit when I'm playing Star Wars Rebellion. I have to stand and I start pacing. Did I win that one, Nathan?
Yeah,
I win!
because I've only played it once.
Okay.
Even though it is sitting on my shelf in shrink wrap. I only got to play the Rebellion side. I haven't tried yet the Imperial side, so I can't really fairly judge Star Wars Rebellion.
I've played it probably about 7 times so far, and every time we play it, no matter what side I'm on, I get super stressed out, because if I'm the Imperials, I'm like, the Rebels are going to win. Where the heck are they? How can they be hiding so well? What are they doing? And I see the other person just sweating. Because I've been on that side, I've been like, oh my gosh, they built what? They have how many things? Why does that Death Star keep coming towards me? It's insane. I have an X-Wing and a regular trooper, and they have like 5,000 things. It's just awesome, no matter what side you're on. As the Imperials, you're just like, I don't know how they're hiding. Where the heck are you? I think I've searched everywhere. And the Rebels are like, they're right beside me. A phenomenal game.
It sounds cool. You sell it well.
You definitely need to play this game. It is awesome.
I would have to say I do have a problem with this game, which is the same problem I have with Twilight Struggle, is player count. It's really hard for me to get a 2-player game to the table. Now, I know a lot of people don't necessarily have that problem, but for me, that's an issue.
And no matter what it says, Star Wars Rebellion is a 2-player game. It is not 4 or 3. It's 2. It has a variant where you can play Admiral General. So one person's in charge of the ground troops and one person's in charge of space. It doesn't really work out. So I have 2 games you're going to have to play, Dan.
That's okay. I know I've got a couple that you need to play, so it's all fair.
I will tell you, don't let me borrow Glory to Rome.
I will not let you borrow that.
That would be a bad idea.
That's not leaving my possession. Sort of connected to stress, and I think Nathan hit on this a little bit, is sort of the concept of challenge or balance in a game, right? Now, when I was thinking about this, too much balance can definitely be a bad thing. If there's too much balance in the game, then the game's like totally flat and there's nothing to game. But for me, games can be exciting because they can be unpredictable. They can be swingy. You can have a come from behind victory. But ultimately, like you said, Nathan, the game should feel fair even if it is tough. And I think co-ops nail this much better than a lot of other games. So my pick for this category for my collection was Pandemic, being the classic that it is.
I was worried you were going to say Cosmic Encounter.
No.
Well, I do love that one.
What would be your number 1 co-op game that gives you the right amount of stress?
For me, it would be the Pandemic Legacies.
Fair.
Yeah, I like Pandemic Legacy Season 1. I do like Robinson Crusoe a lot. Like, more than I should.
It's a little bit too hard sometimes. Well, generally, it's like I have yet to win a game.
You do, in fact, like it too much. I can verify this. It is a fact of science.
Yeah. When the designer says that if you're winning the game, you're playing it wrong.
See, that's a little bit too much on the challenge side of the equation rather than the balance side of the equation. So, yeah, I'm going to pass on that one.
The Pandemic Legacy Season 1 was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it eased you into it. Mech vs. Minion also did a good job with that, slowly upgrading the difficulty, but never to the point where you couldn't play it with a family.
I don't know. Sometimes when my mech gets damaged so much it just runs on damage, it turns into a non-family friendly game. I'm like, why is my thing keep going in the corner? Quit shooting in the corner. What are you doing?
Well, that's true. You will lose some games, but you will win the majority. Well, it is for... I can't see what the age range is.
My daughter, who was 12 at the time, really loves the game. She's 13 now, but she really liked it. So obviously, like 12 and up at least.
And being a cooperative, if they're younger, you can help them out.
No, they can help me out.
I think the publisher says 14 plus and BGG says 10 plus, so somewhere in there.
All right, we're just go in the middle and go with 12.
Right, so you're correct.
Although in BGG we trust.
They've got good information on them. You just have to know where to look.
Yes.
Anything on the internet, you just need to know how to filter the information. BGG's already filters it a bit. It helps out.
Tapestry's still not out, right?
Definitely not retail. I think I saw a retail release date of November on it through my distributor information.
So it already currently has a rating of 6.4. 316 people have rated it. And Jamie Stegmaier came out and said, no one has the game.
Huh. Except maybe preview copies, right?
Pretty sure they didn't rate it, but yeah. There was a rating embargo on it where people couldn't play it until its release date.
Huh, interesting.
That game looks awesome, though, by the way. It falls into the nice title that makes no sense for me. Neat art, and made by Stonemaier Games, so it has really cool production.
We're not discussing our wish list yet. We might get to that down the road, though, I think.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm jumping the gun here. As if anyone wants to send me a present.
I already got your birthday and Christmas, so too late.
All right.
Somebody pick another game. I'm sure you'll hit one of these talking points that I haven't hit on yet.
Oh, yeah. Let's get back to the
topic at hand.
Here's a great game. Dead of Winter.
Oh.
Its mechanics are okay.
Okay.
It is a cooperative game.
Yeah.
It has a hidden traitor in it that unbalances the game a little bit. Yet, it is amazing. Every time I play it, doesn't matter if the traitor just wins just because it's a hard game to begin with. It was amazing. Just the stories from it, and just basically the stories that actually we generate. Each time you take a turn, another player looks at a event card, and then if it triggers, a story goes off. In that, and just the names of the character and the little blurb about the character, make super awesome stories. Like, one of my best games ever is there's a Santa that's a hobo Santa, that if he dies, you go up one morale. So I had hobo Santa and a school teacher, all right? I was a traitor. In order to win, I only had to have one person alive, and they had to lose. They were down to one morale. I used hobo Santa to shank my own character. And I won with Hobo Santa. And my daughters have kept that story for the last 2 years because of how amazing it was. Because this is the character that no one liked, that almost immediately gets killed.
A strong story can definitely make a game. And a strong story comes from not only the game's theme, but it also needs to have a good arc, right? The game needs to sort of have a beginning, a middle, and an end where different sorts of things happen. But ultimately, if you've got a game that's good on narrative, and you enjoy it for its narrative, it's not really about the destination, but the journey. Like, who you become in the game, what happens to you to the interim. And RPGs, of course, are really good at this. But for board games, my pick was the game Fortune and Glory, which is this big coffin-sized box from Flying Frog Production that's basically Indiana Jones in a box. You go on this pulp-style adventure, hunting down artifacts, possibly beating up Nazis and or the mob, and as you manage to deal with various adventures, you gain some resources, which allow you to properly equip your character, and then you get to do more and risk more in your future endeavors in the later game. So, definitely a good arc to it.
Yeah.
And definitely dripping in theme.
That is a game I've always wanted to play. It sounds really awesome.
Oh, you see, there's another one.
So, Nathan, what is the game that tells the best story for you?
Besides Time Stories?
You want to tell us why Time Stories is amazing? Go for it.
The art itself is...
Minimalistic. Minimalistic is the word.
Yeah, the art is fairly minimalistic, but it does a lot with very little. The introduction is not much, but you're directing the story. You're deciding where to go. You're deciding how to do things. You got a lot of freedom in this game where you can go a lot of different routes. And there isn't necessarily just one route you have to take to be able to win the game. You're not worried about getting the most points or something that dry where you're trying to optimize every move. You're looking at, this looks interesting, let's check that out. You know, this person looks a little off. Maybe we should keep our distance from them. So you're more reacting thematically to things rather than logically and strategically.
Basically hoping that the next leap is the next leap home, right?
Oh.
Scott Bakula! Oh, sorry.
Isn't there like super cool twists in that? Because the minimalist cover art, it shows you an idea of what's going to happen, but then something completely different happens during each of the episodes?
As much as people avoid talking about them, it's hard to completely avoid some of these spoilers because you can't really talk about anything in this game without spoiling something. Everything's important and everything gives you a big hint of what could happen. So there's really limited what you can talk about, unfortunately. More so than most legacy games.
So let's just go ahead off and everyone give their top 10 spoilers.
On your Dead of Winter, you touched on something else that I think is very important. The theme of that game is really great. The narrative is really great. But what it also does really well is it remembers that the most important thing for a game is that it is a catalyst to social interaction.
Well, who let you use fancy words? I mean, who lets you do these things?
The game should instigate interaction between the players, between the game itself, and those interactions should be memorable.
I completely agree. That is actually, unfortunately, a very good point.
Yep.
The best games are ones where you have stories from them afterwards. Like you said, you tell them for days and days and days.
I had a sort of idea connected to narrative, and I called it the magic circle. So games create a safe space where we can be a little serious or a little silly, a place where it's okay to beat each other up. You know, you sit down to a dudes on a map game, you know you're going to be beating the crap out of each other. Or go into a situation where you know you're going to have a laugh, which party games do relatively well. For me, King of Tokyo is actually a great game in this regards because mechanically it's just a push your luck dice roller with some added complexity through the various cards. But this is the sort of game that you can have a conversation around that isn't about the game. You can also like totally get into it and declare that you are the King of Tokyo and daring others to come at you. Or, you know, you could be silly with it and be like, oh man, I've got parasitic tentacles. Sweet.
Just going to point out, for listeners that are paying attention to counts, that there's two great games with standees.
Oh, Dead of Winter and King of Tokyo?
I'm just saying, they both have standees and they're great games.
Both have standees. I will confess to this.
King of Tokyo is an awesome game. So like when you're in Tokyo, you can't heal, but the expansion let you trade in, I think, 2 of your hearts, and you could get a power-up while you were in Tokyo.
Yeah, the evolution cards really upgrade that game because each monster in the box has their own deck of evolution cards, so it makes each monster feel a little bit different. The King, their carbon copy of King Kong, is all about getting into Tokyo and staying there and soaking up a lot of damage and dishing it out. Whereas the Kraken is more about healing and energy. You know, it heals because it's just a giant jellyfish, and if you cut off a tentacle, it'll regrow it.
Yeah, I really like that part where you're like in Tokyo, you're like, come on, come at me. Now I got laser eyes, suckers.
This is a game I've been meaning to get to the table and try again because I played it once and it really did not hit with me, but it was also a really, really quick game, quicker than it should have been. Maybe 2 turns and it was over. It's like, just because people rolled really aggressively in it.
That'll totally happen in that game, and who cares? That game is all about the people playing it. You're going to play it multiple times. That can happen, whatever. You'll have a bad roll. Someone gets all, 6 dice? All hits. And you're just dead. But it's fun. So who cares? It ends really quick. Just play another game. It's all about like that. I'm beating the poop out of all these monsters, and it's just fast. It's awesome. It's an awesome game.
It's really cute when somebody goes into Tokyo and is like, come at me. The person next to them rolls a couple of hits and they're like, all right, I'm out. Yeah. You can go in there.
So Nathan, what is a game like that has a basic rule set and just creates great stories from a basic game?
In our first episode, we talked about one of my most memorable stories from a game. And that would be from Descent, first edition. And we were really near the end of the dungeon, and we knew the boss was in the next room, but then we were swamped by monsters, and we didn't look good. And then my dad decided to take all these monsters on by himself and let us run in and take on the boss to try to, win the game before we run out of time. And, he's fighting all these monsters, rolling really phenomenally. He's completely surrounded, killing monsters left and right. And we're taking on this boss with the rest of the group. And, we managed to take down the boss, and he managed to, afterwards, get away from this huge mob of monsters. And he's cheering as he runs away and killing things. And it's like, he got so excited and everybody enjoyed this game.
Yeah, that sounds pretty awesome to me.
We have a all-day marathon, New Year's Eve, so we go all day. So about 14 to 16 hours of Descent 2nd edition this time, and we did Descent before, and it is phenomenally awesome, but after 14, 16 hours, I can't remember any of it anymore. It's just too long. But, oh my, do we have fun playing that?
Another thing that we should talk about is innovation or uniqueness. Unique themes very important to me, or unique mechanic, new way of addressing how this could work in a game. So a good example of that would be, I'm drawing a blank.
This has been your topic.
You brought this up, man.
I had a long day. Our computer systems were down all day, and at 3 o'clock we're trying to finish up the whole day's worth of work.
All I hear is a bunch of excuses. One game that really surprised me that took a different way of dealing with combat was Blood Rage. Blood Rage and its diceless combat was really unique for me. I mean, there's a lot of games that have done it afterwards and maybe better, but at the time, so you had equal opportunity to get these cards, and you can use them, and you have your different monsters that you could upgrade, and it was basically simple. Who had the most power in the area, and what cards did you play to add on to that number, and whoever had the highest number wins. It is awesome. I wasn't actually sure that I would like it because I'm used to, hey, let's rock dice and see who wins.
Nathan's comments definitely hits on one of my talking points. I called this exploration. So there's something that's super special about discovery, of exploring the unknown, and games that are new or unique definitely capitalize this because part of the exploration can be the game system itself. So for me, there's another game that fits this better in my collection than the infamous Seventh Continent. I've spent something like 30 plus hours in this game, which is 20 or more play sessions, and I've only completed one curse out of 7. The game's got a ton of content, and it is half an exploration game. The other half is like a survival element where you have to manage resources in order to make sure you can get to where you need to go, but oftentimes you don't know where you need to go. And this is the problem we're having in our current campaign is we know we need to do something, but we don't know where to find it. So
how many players did you play with Seventh Continent? Because I know you can solo up to, what, 4 or 5?
I think it's 4 out of the base box at least. I backed it on the first Kickstarter, so I don't have any of the materials from the second Kickstarter, and they might have added a 5th player there.
Would you really want 5 players?
The game works best with a smaller group. You're effectively doing your actions together, in which case the active player is doing it, and the other people can just toss in their items or equipment bonuses to help if needed. Or if you've got multiple players, they can split apart from each other and perform actions separately or to explore more of the map. All the campaigns that I've played with this game have been 2-player with my brother. I've demoed it at, I think, all player counts, but those have been one-off sessions where we play for about an hour or get off the first tutorial island in the recommended first quest and then just stop there, just to sort of show people the system.
So I know Nathan's played it.
Yes, I've played it. I have to play it some more. I've struggled through the rules a little bit. I have to review the rules. I think we might have got something wrong because it didn't seem like we were getting anywhere, unfortunately. And I know it can be a very long game. That's one of the things that I found a little frustrating is the time range. I think it said it like 40 to 1,000 minutes per game. It's a huge time range depending on what you do and how you do it. And because you can keep alive fairly easily, but you may not be actually progressing towards your goal.
My one complete game experience was from when we started to when we finally finished. It was something like 16 hours to complete the first quest. But that involved 3 restarts. Because if you die in this game, there's an easy mode where you get to respawn once for free. But if you die a second time, then you basically have to start the quest over again from the start. It's the second time through you already know bits of the terrain because you've played through it once before and can make a more efficient second run. And that's actually part of the game experience.
So that gets up a good point of games that take an obnoxious amount of time but are still awesome. And for me, that's Twilight Imperium. Twilight Imperium is a super awesome thematic game that feels like we played it for an hour. And it's like 12 hours later. Every time I play it, I feel that the end comes too fast. Because you only have to get 10 points, and it feels like the game is ending really quick. It's not, but it's awesome that it feels that way.
And I think what it does well is the arc. Things tend to ramp up as you go, and you're getting more and more invested, and you don't notice the time passing because you're getting excited by all these new things you can do and all this expansion you're doing and the combat that's now happening. So there's always something new just because of the way the game works.
Yeah, you're invested in other people's turns because you can follow. It's amazing.
Yeah, I had a category on my short list that sort of fits this, and I called it the epic game. Various games throughout history have been referred to the epic, and usually it's because they're rather long, have a large scale, and that could be the size of the board or the number of bits or the scope. You know, the game takes place over a long time or through the development, like Civilization-style games can be epic for sure. And I didn't really have a strong contender for an epic game in my collection because I sort of divested myself of games that take more than like 3-ish hours. These games only tend to feel epic when you're invested for longer periods. There's definitely a truth to the element that these long games have to have an arc in order to keep your attention for that length of time. So it is something that they do, and they do well.
Have you played Twilight Imperium before?
I have not.
Oh my gosh. Next game night, we do it like once a year, you're coming to the Twilight Imperium.
Oh, man. I don't know if I can commit to the 12 or 13 hours or whatever it's going to be.
That's okay. We'll tell you it's like a 1-hour game, and then you're stuck. We'll bring out like Wingspan or something and then slide it away and put out Twilight Imperium and be like, oh no!
Curses, it's the old bait and switch!
I think you'd love it. You mean you like Xia Legend of Dwarf System. How long does that game take?
We don't play it to the full 20 points when we play it. We usually play it only to 10 or 15. But we played it to 15, and I think it clocked in at 2.5 hours. So...
a little less than 12, but Terraforming Mars can take up to 3 to 4 hours to play.
Yeah, depending on player count and how fast people ramp the end game.
Yeah, and then when you add those expansions in, it actually super slows it down because it makes it easier just to sit there and get points instead of actually terraforming Mars.
Right now, my Terraforming Mars is vanilla. It's just got the expansion that's in the base box, the
Corporation expansion.
The Corporation one, thank you. And that's mixed in with the deck because, you know, it came in the box. I'm going to use it. But I have to do my research on Terraforming Mars expansions because if I ever add one, I'm going to want it to speed up the game on some level.
I have all the expansions currently. I played them all at least 10 times. And I will tell you from experience that when you put in corporations, it does make the game longer because you get all the interactive cards in there. So without playing with corporations, the game's shorter. Prelude, if you only had to pick one expansion, is hands down the best.
That's the one that sort of stuck out from my provisional research. While we're talking about Terraforming Mars, let's say that Terraforming Mars is also an awesome game.
It is.
I've said it before, Terraforming Mars flow is ultimately what gets it to the table. There's low downtime in any game that has high flow. Each action or segment of the game easily turns into next. And except for maybe Twilight Imperium, if you look up from the game and you can't believe that it's been 2-3 hours, you've probably experienced the state of flow.
Terraforming Mars is a good example that the art doesn't do it, the production quality doesn't do it, the gameplay does. Just the sheer mechanical genius that the game is. And actually, to be able to still feel thematic is amazing.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you on there, because the art is, of course, not very consistent. And the player mats are toss-aways. The only thing cool in that game is the metal resource cubes that you track all your resources with.
The game really does feel like someone rated clip art.
Sadly, tragically.
They went to that community open images and they just went crazy. They're like, oh, community images. Let's steal them all and put them on the thing.
Yeah.
Well, they even have personal pictures. They got the pictures of one of the game designer's dog.
Stephen Bonacker has his own card now, too. Terraforming Mars is rightfully number 3 on BGG. It is amazing.
And hopefully they're fixing the production value with Kickstarters we're getting.
Not really, but they will give us player mats.
Yes.
That are definitely needed, because if someone sneezes or breathes or does anything, those cubes are moving all over the place. It's so bad. And we play it so frequently. Probably play it at least once a week. My oldest daughter loves it. We actually just got a separate sheet of paper and wrote down the numbers for each of the productions. Because people do need to breathe. Nothing bad will happen. Don't worry about it.
Just hold your breath for 3 hours. You'll be fine.
Actually, I had a friend growing up that did hold his breath until his face turned purple for the next 3 days. Well, friend is kind of stretching it.
All right.
A guy I knew.
What game is awful? Very few people actually like it, but you love it. So what game is the worst? Generally considered bad.
Oh.
And I'm putting you on the spot.
Would you be asking this because you knew what I wanted to talk about?
Yes.
Oh. Okay, yes.
Oh, wait. I think I know what Nathan's about to say here. We'll see if I'm correct.
What are you going to guess?
Were you going to mention Charterstone, perhaps?
We don't speak Charterstone.
Well, it's come up before, so...
That's true. We do, but we shouldn't. All right, so Nathan, the game you're saying is probably worse.
I want to talk about one of the best, worst games I've played recently.
Yeah, go for it.
And that's Seafall. Seafall gets a lot of flack that it rightfully deserves, but it has a lot of really good elements to it.
Do tell.
We played through the campaign, and we were really enjoying it, although towards the end, it did end up breaking down, and we ended up giving up before we actually finished the game. That's one of the only Legacy games I have not finished. So that kind of tells you there's problems with this game.
I think that was generally the main consensus, too, with other people. They didn't finish it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, is the campaign 12 games like Pandemic Legacy?
No, the campaign is not really a set game length, and that's also part of the problem.
Okay. So how many games in did you make it?
We played 15 games, so we actually put a lot of time into this game.
Okay, yeah.
We had a lot of troubles getting it started. The rulebook is very, very poorly written. I would compare this to Robinson Crusoe, the first edition.
No.
Is it bad as that, or is it as bad as First Martian?
It's not quite as bad as First Martian, where it's unplayable. It's more like Robinson Crusoe, where it's got a lot of great mechanics, but when you're reading the rule books, you have to jump all over the place. And we initially got a couple rules wrong, and then we read through the rule books again, and we found that the rule we were missing wasn't actually in the rules, it was in the example of how the rules worked. And it was a critical rule. It's like how raiding works. And this is Seafaring, where you're going out in ships, you're trading, you're exploring, and you're raiding other colonies and things like that. When you raid, as long as you don't sink, you are considered a successful raid. But when you're reading the rules on how that works, it doesn't actually say that. You have to actually, as I said, read the example of where it breaks down. In this situation, this happened. And then it tells you, in there, as long as you don't sink, you're successful. So that's the first major shortcoming of this game. And I think that's where a lot of people gave up on this game, which is unfortunate, because the game itself is phenomenal. It's like the trading is nice, very satisfying. You can get a lot of money coming in and going out and building up. You can build your empire, or you can choose to explore. And, you know, you're always finding new things and find new ports to trade with, find friendly colonists that will help you get supplies. And there's little story elements you read every time you explore. That part is phenomenally well done. The combat stuff, you can't do it the first couple of games, which is good because you get kind of used to how the game works first. Then it'll introduce ship-to-ship combat, which tends not to happen a whole lot. You can raid colonies too, which tends to happen more. And so you're stealing from other players and meanwhile trying to up your defenses. And all that works really well. Then you have the legacy element on top of it. And that's where you have another flaw. Where you have this legacy element that is really nice in itself. Where you're unlocking things, advancing the story. But the flaw with that is they're not directly connected. You can actually, in theory, play 15, 16 games of this and never unlock anything. You could just focus on trading and keep ending the game real quick. And that kind of breaks it.
Is that the fatal flaw for you guys, or what was the I don't want to play this anymore part?
The part where we didn't want to play it anymore is like on our 14th or 15th game, we were frustrated because I had gotten so powerful. Winning the game didn't matter anymore. I just put the slightest effort in and I'd win the game. But I wanted to progress the game. So I was intentionally not winning in order to try to progress the story and, you know, unlock more things. So I was like doing things that were definitely bad for me just to unlock things and find out what's happening. And then the last unlock element has a puzzle element, which totally did not fit the rest of the game. If you don't figure out this puzzle, which is, I don't want to spoil anything, it's like, but you really have to look very closely at the cards and every element of the game, and then read all sorts of excerpts from the books by interrogating people. And you're constantly just getting these very vague clues that really don't lead you to the solution unless you've inspected everything super, super carefully, and it just does not fit. And that's what broke it for us. I actually had to go on BGG and read how to unlock the final box and actually end the game.
So, you got 15 plays out of it. So that's not too bad.
Yeah.
Would you recommend this game for, I think it's $20 on Amazon?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, each game's 2 to 3 hours. It is a lot of fun. Just go into it realizing the legacy element doesn't quite work right. Most of the time I've seen this on sale for like 10 to 12 bucks too. So for that kind of prices, why not? You definitely get your money's worth out of this.
You get little ship miniatures.
And if nothing else, you could choose to just completely ignore the legacy element and play a really good Euro-style trading in the Mediterranean-style game.
James, did you have a game in mind when you gave us this question?
Of course not. Yeah, I did, actually. So my game that is completely awful that I love is The Great Dalmuti. It is built on the backs of oppression. So in The Great Dalmuti, you have several different roles. One is the Great Dalmuti, the Lesser Dalmuti, merchants, the Lesser Peon, and the Peon. And the point of the game is to be completely unfair. So it is a trick-taking game where the Great Dalmuti gives its 2 worst cards to the Peon, and the Peon gives its 2 best cards to the Great Dalmuti. Then the Lesser Dalmuti gives its worst card, and the Lesser Peon gives its best card. And the merchants, which are on the side, keep their cards. So that's unbalanced there. And the other thing that's unbalanced is the Great Dalmuti always leads the first trick. It keeps going around and around and around until everyone passes. The issue is when you have someone that leads, has potentially the best cards, it's super easy for them to stay in that position. Because the game ends once everyone has gone out. And the first person that goes out gets to be the Great Dalmuti, the second person the Lesser Dalmuti, and so on. So the game, on paper, is awful. It's completely unfair. It's unbalanced. Yet it's amazingly fun. It is so much fun to be the Greater Peon and work your way up to the Great Dalmuti. It's super awesome for anyone to take out the Great Dalmuti. That part makes the game awesome. I've played it with a ton of people. It's super easy. A lot of people are saying they didn't like the rules when they first started, but then they started playing and they loved the rules. So that's my example of a great game that is awful.
To be honest, it kind of reminds me of a game that a 5-year-old might write, where the 5-year-old is almost guaranteed to win. You could just call it I win.
Yeah, 100%. That's basically what it is. Someone is the I win, and you need to take out the I win. A lot of times everyone needs to work together, and it's super hard when the people that are in the Lesser Dalmuti and the merchant places don't necessarily want to work with you, because working with you means that they could lose their place and you could snake up. So it is unbalanced on a lot of levels.
I think something broke for you to enjoy this game.
Probably. It's just weird, but it's super enjoyable.
I've got a game that probably only I liked when I had it. I did eventually get rid of this game because I couldn't find a good play group for it, because it really, really shines at like 3+, and I basically was just playing with my brother at the time.
Okay.
It's Archipelago. Either of you guys heard about this one at all?
Mm-hmm.
I have.
Okay. It's a colonization style game where you're exploring a chain of islands. There's 2 things in this game that made it amazing for me personally. One is that the various systems that are in the game are actually interconnected in a way that you can't just do a thing and expect no consequences. If you explore a lot, then you're going to add a lot of people to the market, and then that makes the unemployment line larger, which is going to create unrest, and that has an effect on the game, because if the number of revolutionaries exceed the number of colonists in the game, then the revolutionaries have an uprising and everyone loses.
All right.
Except everyone gets dealt a secret card, and this card has 2 things on it. The top half is when the game end triggers, and the bottom half is something that's worth victory points. So if you see somebody build a church, you don't know if they're building that church to advance the end game, or they're building a church because churches are worth victory points, or they're building a church because they want to have control of a church, and that gives them certain options when controlling that unrest. So, like, there's this hidden mechanic that's just amazing. And the game has gotten some smack for its semi-co-op nature, but I thought it was just perfect on that axis.
I have an exact example of that, too. Champions of Midgard is one of my favorite games, and I can't find anyone that likes it.
Really? Champions?
Champions of Midgard, by the way, is a worker placement, but in this worker placement game, there is dice. And I know a lot of people don't like dice in worker placement game, and especially dice when it comes to combat. So in the game, there's multiple different areas you could do, and a lot of your points come from either taking out the troll, draugrs, or the monsters that you have to actually sail to. And then when you sail to the monsters, there's a card that flips over that sometimes you have to fight another monster before you fight your monster. And the monsters have different rules, like you can't use spearmen or whatever. And you basically get your food, your wood, and your resources, and you get the dice as resources. And you can allocate your dice to each area that you decided to invest your worker in for combat. And when combat comes along, you roll your dice, you see if you killed the monster. If you didn't kill the monster, you have to take your casualties. And then you roll again until you either run out of people or you've killed the monster. And what I found is people love to push their luck. And Champions of Midgard is not a game that rewards people that push their luck. If you don't allocate enough that you reasonably are sure that you're going to win, you won't, or you most likely won't. So what'll end up happening is people seem to get agitated when they invested in 4 fights and they win none of them. Well, you invested 2 people, so if you don't roll perfectly, you just lost all your warriors. When I fight a troll, I invest 3 to 4 people on a troll that does 1 damage. And I'll lose a guy, but that troll's dead.
Yeah, it's a game that's all about mitigating risk.
Right, and it seems to be a lot more fun for people not to mitigate risk and more be I'm taking a risk. I am gambling that these areas I'm going to win at, and a lot of times they win none of it. And that's devastating in that game. You probably lost if you took 4 combats and won 0.
Yeah, it certainly does not reward risk-taking. The expansion kind of balanced that a little bit more.
The Valhalla,
yeah.
Bad Roller.
Do you have the expansion? Have you played with it? What are your opinions on it?
I would really love to get the expansion. I've had such a hard time getting people to play the base game. It's sort of hard for me to justify buying the expansion.
I hear you.
If I buy the expansion, I'm probably more likely to be able to get people to like the game. It's still that, am I going to spend $30 and have everyone still not want to play this game?
Yeah, it becomes a bigger risk.
Right. So Nathan, do you have a game like that? Where you like it, but no one else does?
There's a game I got on deep discount. It was $10 called Progress. Now, not the greatest name, but it's a Civilization-style game that really pares it down where you're only focused on the tech tree. So it's very minimalistic, and you're just trying to learn new techs, and you have the prerequisite techs, and it's just the tech tree element you would find in Sid Meier's Civilization. And I think it does it really well, a lot better than most of these other civs. But I think a lot of people found it too dry.
Is that Progress Evolution of Technology?
Yes, that would be the full title.
That is ugly. I just Googled it on BGG, and why? They didn't even try. They did not even try.
I'm sorry, what are you seeing on your end?
You want to describe it?
I'm looking at the BGG page right now, so...
There is smoke and a train, and it says Evolution of Technology, and it has a picture of an atom. It looks like something from a PBS special about space. So you see the PBS thing there? That looks like a PBS special about history and space, and some windmill with I think the moon. I don't know. It looks horrible. I will say the cards are a little better.
I agree, the cover looks a little wonky, but this card art that I'm looking at looks pretty clean, so...
The cards sort of remind me a lot of Seven Wonders.
It's basically an engine building, and I thought it was really successful as an engine builder. I can see where the replayability may be a little lacking. Only have a limited range you can go in because you have the base technologies and you have the technologies that feed off of that, and you really don't have that many branches to go off of. So yeah, it's limited itself in that regard. And it doesn't ever get into future technology where it could have been inventive and really expanded things.
Man, you can't research cyborgs?
No. You can research the theater. Or a cupboard. I don't know what that actually is. It's just a cupboard. Oh, refrigeration. That looks like a cupboard.
That was important. Refrigeration was important.
Oh my gosh, that tech tree looks horrible.
It's not an attractive game.
Did you spot the flowchart and the images? I tend to ignore flowcharts whenever they appear in games because generally speaking, flowcharts don't help you learn the game. They only help you understand it once you already know it.
That one looks like a circuit. It's all the appeal of 1980 data diagrams.
Yeah, this would be one that I think they could make a new edition and make it look nice and maybe add a little flashiness to it, and it could do well.
I probably enjoyed bashing Nathan's game a little too much, but it was fun.
Fair enough.
Actually, I have a second one that I should hate.
Oh, here we go.
But I actually really enjoy.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Candyland.
No, it's called Roadkill Rally.
Oh, no.
Roadkill Rally. Okay.
And it is exactly what it sounds like. You upgrade your vehicle, get spikes on the tires and all that kind of stuff, and you're trying to run over old people and children and stuff to get points.
The cover art is but not horrible. but the game is horrible.
Oh man, the cover art looks amazing to me. It looks like a bad 80s movie. Sign me up.
Look at the tiles and stuff.
Yeah, those aren't too exciting.
It's like they took super 80s art and they're like, I'm going to make this retro awesome art. And then I'm going to use the Commodore 64 to make the tiles.
Yeah.
It's a fast game. It has the semi-randomized map. On this one, as you go, you add more to the track. And you have randomized elements on those tracks. So you can have, like, slicks to slide on. And you have more people to run over. And I actually played this with my parents, and my mom and dad actually liked this. You wouldn't think like an older lady would kind of go for like running over people, especially elderly people. And, you know, the take that element of this game really kind of makes it really entertaining, and it comes off as kind of cartoony and not really realistic, so it makes it fun. Although I would say, don't read the rule books for this, because the rule book can be a little bit distasteful. Learn to play like through a video or something.
We have found that Nathan is not a good person for figuring out what amazing games are.
That wasn't what we were talking about.
I'm just going with it.
We were talking about games we like that nobody else does.
Yeah, that's true. Because Great Town Moody's not an amazing game. It's just good.
James, did you have one last topic to throw at us after we talked about these amazing games that are actually terrible? These amazing games that are amazing only to us?
I did. What was it? It was a good thing, too. I should have wrote it down.
All right, well, I got one to throw at you if you're blanking.
Hopefully Dan's not getting murdered.
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
Okay.
One of the game elements that I identified that can make a game awesome is complexity. So there are different kinds of complexity and different ways that games manage them appropriately. We mentioned epic games previously, so longer games can get away with more complexity than shorter ones, for sure. But complexity can also come in the interactions. A game can have multiple systems, and they can interact in interesting and different ways. My complex game that is amazing is Tzolk'in, the Mayan calendar. Now, this game is somewhat notorious. It's effectively a worker placement game. You place your workers on these giant plastic gears, and on your turn, you either place any number of workers or withdraw any number of workers. And the trick is the longer the workers stay on the gears, the more powerful the action you get when you pull them off. So time is a resource in this game, and the game easily lends itself to combos, because when you're pulling off workers, you can pull them off in whatever order you wish. So you pull off this worker to get some resources, pull off this worker to build some buildings, pull off this worker to advance technologies, so on and so forth.
Yeah, my game like that, you're basically going to pick one of 4 different actions, and you get to do the top part and maybe the bottom part. But they're both all laid out, and that's Scythe. Scythe is a super awesome game where the rules are pretty basic for it. It's pretty easy to grok what you need to do for the game. And where it comes into play is, how do I maximize my turns? Because you can upgrade your bottom section and your top section, and depending on how you play things with your resources out and what you're doing, do I want to take this action so I can do the top part, but I might not be able to do the bottom part at all? Plus, how am I spreading out to the most areas, but I still have to worry about everyone else, because a big bulk of the points, like how much area you control at the end, it gets complex as you go, but the rules stay relatively easy to teach.
It's definitely good to have a game that's easy to teach, but the complexity comes in as you play it. But you have the other end of the spectrum where it can be a very complex game, as long as it has strong internal logic. And I think a good game for that is Gloomhaven.
Standees, number 3.
What I'm talking about is, if you ask yourself what would make sense, and that is generally what the rule is, that's a good internal logic. You don't want the rules to ever feel counterintuitive.
Obtuse?
Tacked on.
Yeah, you don't want that either. Gloomhaven, what it does well. It's a very complex game. But say if you walk into a trap, you're going to take damage, or if it's like a tangle trap, it's going to slow your movement. You can kind of guess based on what they are, what they will do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Gloomhaven is a game I haven't played, but I hear it's awesome. So what we're going to do now is, everyone got all their themes in?
Yeah, I've got a couple more talking points, but I'll post to the Board Game Guild for extra content for people who want to log into that.
All right, that'd be awesome. So we went over what we think games are amazing, but the one thing we haven't done yet is, if you could only have one game, no other games in your entire collection, you can only keep one. So this has to be the most amazing game for you, period. What would it be? So I'm just going to go ahead off and give you mine. Even though there is only, I think, 11 scenarios in it right now, it might grow because coming out with a new expansion, which I think gives that 3 more scenarios. So even though it has that limited number of scenarios, my number one game has become Mansions of Madness. It is amazingly thematic. It integrates with the app perfectly. I didn't really even realize how much mood enhancement like music is for a game. The game's phenomenal. If I only had one game period, it would be Mansions of Madness is the greatest game ever. It's thematic, immersive, easy to teach. You don't have to do a one versus many because all that upkeep is all handled by the app, which is very good.
I'm going to do my thing and make a simple question more complicated.
To be clear, I'm taking all your games except for one. Which one do you get to keep?
You cannot take my games. Since it's the only game I can keep, I want replayability. I want, longevity of the game. Considering that, I'm going to say Gloomhaven. It's a great game. It's a great campaign. It has 100+ hours just to play through it once. You can easily play through it multiple times, so that's something I could continue playing for the rest of my life.
Your question really brings home the last point I wanted to make before we brought this to a close, too. We've been talking a lot of things that can make games awesome. The narrative, the arc, the components, the theme, and so on and so forth. My theory is that no one element of the game will make it excellent, but rather it is a confluence, or a relationship, the interaction between, and the combination of different elements that really make a game awesome. If a game is going to be awesome, it's going to score good marks in multiple categories. Mm-hmm. If I had to pick one game, oh man, that is tough. Longevity is certainly a thing. And while I do want to say the game that you don't want me to say, I'm going to go with Shia Legends the Drift System.
Ah, yeah.
The game's got a variable setup. The mission cards and events put a good amount of variability into that game. The game's got a good array of ship powers and combinations thereof that you can experience over the length of it.
They really need to reprint that game. I mean, it's an awesome game. I'm not paying $300 for it. Just reprint the dumb thing and I'll give you money.
Shut up and take my money.
Shut up and take my money. No, that is an awesome game. I know they come out with expansions, but every time I see the expansions, I still don't have the base game. Like, what? You're printing the expansion. Print the base game.
The Missions and Powers expansion was the latest expansion. And when they backed Missions and Powers on Kickstarter, they allowed people to buy the base game and the Embers expansion when they ran that Kickstarter.
What? Oh, they need to come out with another expansion so I can back the stupid game. Now I sort of wish you would have picked Glory to Rome so I could get that one.
Well, before we leave, thank you for listening to our podcast. Please like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram or Twitter, join our Board Game Geek Guild 2989, visit our website at tabletopgamingguild.com. And the Tabletop Gaming Guild podcast is a product of Tabletop Gaming Guild LLC. All rights reserved.